The church was quiet enough to hear breathing. White flowers. Cameras lifted. The groom's hands trembled as the bride smiled for the crowd, already victorious. Then a voice cut through the vows, calm, uninvited, unmistakable. "I will marry him instead." Gasps rippled. Heads turned. The bride laughed once, then stopped. Security froze. The groom didn't speak. He just stared. The woman in black didn't raise her voice or step back. She waited. And that was the moment the bride realized. This woman didn't come to argue. If you're ready for a story about power, dignity, forbidden love, and the sweetest revenge you've ever witnessed, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this channel brings you the most addictive romance stories you won't find anywhere else. Drop a fire in the comments if you're team revenge. And let's get into this story. The church tried to recover from the interruption, the way grand rooms always do, by pretending nothing had happened. A cough echoed. Someone shifted in their seat. The organist's fingers hovered, uncertain, then slowly retreated from the keys. Sunlight spilled through stained glass windows, washing the aisle in soft color, as if beauty alone could smooth over what had just been said. At the altar, the bride adjusted her grip on the bouquet. Her smile returned first, practiced and precise. It was the kind of smile built for cameras, for donors, for rooms where power was assumed rather than questioned. She let out a small laugh, light enough to invite others to laugh with her, and for a moment some did. Nervous laughter. Obedient laughter. "This is inappropriate," she said, not loudly, but clearly. Each word landed with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. "Whoever you are, you're interrupting a private ceremony." The groom stood beside her, stiff as if the floor beneath him had turned to glass. His shoulders were squared, his suit perfectly tailored, but his eyes gave him away. They flicked once toward the back of the church, then away, then back again, as if drawn by a force he didn't want to name. The bride noticed. She always noticed. She leaned closer to him, her voice soft enough to sound intimate, sharp enough to sting. "Are you okay?" she asked, smiling for the audience while her fingers tightened around his arm. Not enough to bruise. Enough to remind. He nodded too quickly. "Yes," he said. The word came out thin. Around them, the guests watched with interest now, not concern. This was no longer an interruption. It was entertainment. Phones were no longer discreet. They were raised openly. Whispers slipped between rows like drafts under a door. The bride turned slightly, angling her body so the cameras caught her best side. "Security," she said, glancing toward the aisle. "Please escort her out." Nothing happened. Two men in dark suits stood near the entrance. They didn't move. One of them didn't even look at the woman in black. His eyes were fixed straight ahead, his jaw tight, as if following an instruction given long before this day. The bride's smile faltered, just for a second. "Security?" she repeated. Still nothing. A murmur rolled through the crowd. The bride straightened, lifting her chin. "This is my wedding," she said louder now. "And I will not have it turned into a spectacle." The woman in black remained where she was, hands folded calmly in front of her. She hadn't argued. Hadn't defended herself. She didn't even look at the bride. Her gaze was fixed on the groom. From the back of the church, she had watched everything. She had watched the bride's entrance, slow and deliberate, designed to command all. She had watched the groom's face tighten as vows were rehearsed. She had seen the small moments others missed, the way his jaw clenched when spoken over, the way he deferred before being asked, the way agreement was expected rather than earned. And she had waited. The bride took a step forward, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "You must be very confused," she said, her tone dripping with condescension now. "This man is about to become my husband." At that, the groom finally looked at her fully. His mouth opened, then closed. Whatever he had meant to say stayed trapped behind his teeth. The bride squeezed his arm again. Harder. "Say something," she whispered, still smiling. He swallowed. The church felt too warm. Or maybe it was just him. This isn't the time, he said carefully. Let's just handle this. Handle this. As if it were a spill on a white tablecloth. As if it could be blotted out. The woman in black took a single step forward. Not toward the altar. Toward the aisle light. Toward visibility. Her heels made no sound. That was when the groom felt it, recognition, sudden and undeniable. It hit him like a memory he'd buried too deep and too fast. His breath caught. His fingers twitched at his side. No. He stared at her face, at the calm eyes that held neither anger nor surprise. Just certainty. The bride followed his gaze, irritation flashing across her features. Do you know her? She asked, the question sharp with accusation. He didn't answer. Because now he remembered the last time he'd seen her. Different place. Different stakes. A promise spoken quietly, under pressure he pretended not to feel. The woman met his eyes then. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She simply looked at him. And the look lasted too long to be meaningless. He hadn't seen her in years. And he prayed she hadn't come for this. For a moment, no one spoke. The church hovered in a fragile stillness, as if sound itself was unsure whether it was still allowed. The woman in black stood where the light from the stained glass softened the edges of her silhouette, calm in a room that had begun to tilt. I will marry him instead. The words had already been said, but now they seemed to echo, repeating themselves in the minds of everyone present. A collective inhale rippled through the pews. Someone dropped a phone. Another guest leaned forward, hungry for clarity that did not come. The bride turned sharply, disbelief flashing across her face before settling into something harder. Amusement, sharpened by offense. You, she said, letting the words stretch. This is a wedding, not a performance. A few people laughed again. Not because it was funny, but because laughter felt safer than silence. The woman didn't react. She didn't flinch or rise to the insult. Her eyes remained steady, her posture unchanged. It was as if the bride's words had passed through her without leaving a mark. The groom felt every second drag. He could feel the heat of the room now, the press of attention. He wanted to say something, anything, to steer the moment back to normal. But his throat had tightened, his voice lodged somewhere between memory and fear. The bride stepped closer to the aisle, placing herself deliberately between the woman and the altar. It was a territorial move. A reminder of where she believed power belonged. You have no right to be here, she said. This man is mine. Mine. The word landed heavily. The woman finally spoke again, her voice level, almost gentle. He can decide that. A murmur swept through the crowd. The bride's eyes widened, then narrowed. She turned toward the groom, her smile gone now, stripped away by irritation. Tell her, she demanded. Tell her she's embarrassing herself. All eyes fell on him. He felt the weight of it crush his chest. His lips parted, but no sound came out. In that silence, the truth showed itself more clearly than words ever could. The bride saw it. Her grip tightened. Say it, she hissed, low enough that only he could hear. Say it now. The groom's gaze flicked back to the woman in black. To the past she represented. To the deal he'd convinced himself he could outrun. His voice cracked. He stopped. The woman didn't interrupt. She didn't fill the silence. She let it grow, let it expose him. Around them, whispers rose and fell. The audience had stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. This was a confrontation. And everyone could feel it slipping beyond the bride's control. The bride straightened, her composure cracking at the edges. Security, she said sharply. Remove her. Now. One of the guards shifted his stance. Just slightly. Enough to be noticed. He didn't move forward. The bride stared at him. Did you hear me? The guard glanced toward the woman in black. Then toward another man standing near the back. A brief exchange of looks passed between them, silent, loaded. Then the guard looked away. I'm sorry, he said quietly. We can't. The bride froze. The room froze with her. What do you mean you can't? She snapped. This is my wedding. My family paid for this. The woman in black spoke before the guard could answer. This doesn't concern you, she said calmly, her eyes still on the groom. It concerns him. The bride laughed then, sharp and brittle. You don't even know him. The woman's gaze finally shifted. Just enough. I know him well enough. That did it. The bride turned fully toward her now, anger blazing openly. Who do you think you are? She demanded. Do you have any idea where you are? Who you're talking to? The woman tilted her head slightly. Yes. The single word landed with unsettling weight. The groom's heart hammered. He could feel the eyes of the crowd burning into him, the expectations pressing down from every direction. He had never felt so exposed. So cornered. The bride's voice rose. This is insane, she said, addressing the room now, as much as the woman. She's delusional. Someone escort her out before this gets uglier. No one moved. The bride's confidence faltered, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The crowd sensed it. The shift. Power doesn't vanish loudly. It slips. From the front row, a man stood. The bride's father. He had been watching quietly, his expression unreadable. He was a man used to controlling rooms without raising his voice. A man whose presence alone usually settled disputes before they began. As he rose, the bride's relief was immediate. Dad, she said, gesturing toward the woman. Please. Handle this. He didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the woman in black. At first, his face showed nothing. Then recognition crept in, slow and unmistakable. The color drained from his skin. His jaw tightened. His hands, steady for decades, curled slightly at his sides. The woman met his gaze. She gave a small, respectful nod. The church seemed to lean forward as one. The bride turned, confused now. Dad? She said again. What are you doing? He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on the woman, as if seeing her fully for the first time was already too much. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Then, finally, he spoke. His face strained of color, and he said only one word. Leave. The word fell into the church like a dropped glass, small, sharp, and impossible to ignore. The bride turned to her father in disbelief. Excuse me? She said, laughing once as if she'd misheard. Dad, this woman just disrupted my wedding. Her father didn't look at her. Not yet. Everyone, he said slowly, addressing the room with the authority that had built his fortune and protected his name for decades. Please remain seated. The murmurs softened. Phones lowered. People obeyed without realizing why. He took a step into the aisle. The confidence in his posture was practiced, almost automatic, but there was something brittle beneath it now, something careful. He stopped a few feet from the woman in black and forced a polite smile. It's been a long time, he said. It has, she replied. Her voice was steady. Respectful. Unimpressed. The bride stared between them. You know her? She asked, the edge of panic beginning to show. Her father finally turned to her. Not now. That answer landed harder than a slap. He faced the woman again. This is unexpected, he said. But we can discuss this privately. After the ceremony. There will be no ceremony, the woman said calmly. The groom felt his chest tighten. He hadn't moved. Hadn't spoken. He stood frozen between past and present, watching two forces he didn't fully understand circle each other. The bride's father's smile thinned. You're making a scene, he said. And scenes have consequences. So do promises, the woman replied. The word promise echoed in the groom's head like a warning bell. He shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how small the altar felt beneath his feet. The bride stepped forward, her patience gone. Dad, this is ridiculous. Tell her who we are. Tell her she can't just walk in here and... Enough, her father snapped. The sharpness in his voice stunned her into silence. He exhaled, visibly recalibrating. This wedding, he said more carefully now, is a personal matter. Any agreements made in the past are no longer relevant. The woman tilted her head. You're sure? His eyes flicked briefly to the groom. Just a flicker. But it was enough. You're a smart man, he continued. You understand leverage. Circumstances change. Yes, she said. They do. The groom felt a cold realization creeping up his spine. They weren't talking around him. They were talking about him. The woman took a step closer, not aggressive, not hurried. Deliberate. You benefited from that agreement, she said. Your expansion into Asia. Your access. Your protection. The bride's father stiffened. That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with him, she replied, glancing at the groom for the first time since the interruption began. The groom's mouth went dry. The bride laughed again, but this time it sounded hollow. What agreement? She demanded. What are you talking about? Her father didn't answer. The silence stretched. People leaned forward. The air grew heavy with unspoken truths. You told me, the woman continued, her tone unchanged, that this union would not be broken. That he would honor what was owed. The bride's eyes snapped to the groom. What is she talking about? He opened his mouth. Closed it. He remembered the night clearly now. The room without windows. The calm voice explaining consequences as if they were weather. The document he hadn't fully read. The reassurance that it was temporary. That it was business. That it wouldn't follow him forever. He had been wrong. The bride's father lifted a hand. This is not the place, he said firmly. You're crossing a line. The woman met his gaze. You crossed it first. For the first time, his composure slipped. Just slightly. His jaw tightened. His eyes hardened. You think you can dictate terms here? No, she said. I don't need to. The groom felt something crack inside him. A truth he'd avoided began to surface, sharp and undeniable. He wasn't a partner. He was collateral. The bride stepped closer to him, her voice shaking now. Is this true? She whispered. Did you promise something to her? He looked at her then. Really looked. And saw not just anger, but fear. Fear of losing control. Of losing face. I didn't think it would come to this, he said quietly. Her eyes widened. You promised me. I promised myself I could fix it, he replied. The woman watched him closely. Not with triumph. With expectation. The bride's father drew himself up, anger replacing calculation. This is extortion, he said. And I won't tolerate it. The woman shook her head. This is closure. She turned to the groom. You were told there would come a day when a choice had to be made. The words landed like a verdict. The groom's heart pounded. He could feel the eyes of the crowd, the weight of judgment pressing in. Every path forward looked like loss. The bride grabbed his hand. Don't listen to her, she said urgently. This is insane. We can make this go away. The woman didn't interrupt. She let the plea hang in the air. You can walk away, she said finally, addressing him alone now. With dignity. Or you can stay, and lose everything you built thinking you were free. The bride's father stepped forward. You will not threaten him in my presence. I'm not threatening him, she replied. I'm informing him. Silence swallowed the room. The groom closed his eyes for a moment. Images rushed in, success he hadn't earned alone, doors opened without explanation, warnings ignored because life was good. He opened his eyes and looked at the woman. Then at the bride. Then at the man he had become trying to outrun a promise. This ends now, the woman said softly. One way or another. She took a step back, giving him space. Giving him control. The bride clutched his arm, desperation bleeding through her anger. You won't do this, she whispered. Not to me. Not like this. The groom inhaled slowly. And for the first time that day, everyone waited for him. The silence after her words was heavier than anything that had come before. It pressed down on the groom's chest, on the bride's shallow breathing, on the expectant stillness of the guests who now understood they were witnessing something irreversible. The woman in black broke it, not with force but with truth. "My name doesn't matter here," she said calmly. "What matters is who my father is." A ripple moved through the room, subtle but electric. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle before continuing. "He leads one of the oldest organizations in Korea. Not the kind that seeks attention. The kind that survives by keeping its word." The bride's father stiffened. The last traces of denial drained from his face. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a reckoning. "You came to us," the woman continued, her gaze steady on him now. "Years ago. When your expansion failed. When banks stopped answering your calls. When competitors circled." The groom felt his stomach drop. He hadn't known all of this. Not then. "You asked for protection," she said. "And you were given it." The bride shook her head, incredulous. "This is insane," she whispered. "Dad, tell her she's lying." Her father didn't respond. The woman shifted her attention back to the groom. "You were part of the assurance," she said gently. "A future bridge between families. Not a hostage. Not a prisoner. A promise." The word landed differently now. Not as a threat, but as a bond. "You were told it was symbolic," she went on. "Temporary. That you could build your life freely, as long as the agreement was honored when the time came." The groom swallowed hard. He remembered the words. How easy they'd sounded then. "I didn't know it would mean this," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. The bride stepped forward, voice rising. "So this wedding, was just business?" she demanded, eyes darting between them. "You used him?" The woman looked at her for the first time with something close to sympathy. "No," she said. "This wedding was meant to break the agreement." The room reacted as one. Gasps. Whispers. Shock. The bride's father closed his eyes briefly. "You believe that if he married into your family," the woman continued, "the obligation would disappear. That power could cancel power." She turned back to the groom. "But promises don't dissolve just because they become inconvenient." The groom felt exposed in a way he never had before. Every success he'd celebrated, every door that had opened, none of it had been accidental. He hadn't been protected because he was exceptional. He'd been protected because he was owed. "You could have told me," he said to the bride's father, his voice tight. The older man looked at him then, finally. "You wouldn't have understood," he said. "And I couldn't afford hesitation." The bride stared at her father, betrayal etched across her face. "You gambled my life," she whispered. "I secured our future." He snapped, then stopped himself. The words sounded hollow now. The woman in black exhaled slowly. "This is why I came," she said. "Not to humiliate. Not to collect a debt with blood." She met the groom's eyes. "I came to close a circle." She stepped aside, giving him a clear line forward. Toward the aisle. Toward choice. "You were never forced," she said. "And you won't be now." The bride shook her head, tears finally spilling. "This isn't fair," she said. "You're tearing everything apart." The woman's voice softened. "It was already broken." The groom looked at the bride, at the woman he'd nearly married, at the future that had been designed for him rather than chosen. He saw now how carefully every piece had been placed. How little room there'd been for truth. Then he looked at the woman in black. At the stillness she carried. At the certainty that didn't demand obedience. "What happens if I walk away?" he asked. "You lose what was never yours," she said. "And keep what is." The simplicity of it stole his breath. "And if I stay?" "Then the promise stands," she replied. "And so do the consequences." No threats. No raised voices. Just inevitability. The bride reached for him again, desperation raw. "Please," she whispered. "We can fix this. We can forget she was ever here." The groom gently removed her hand from his arm. He took one step forward. The church held its breath. He didn't look at the bride when he spoke. The groom's voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. But when it came, it cut through the church more cleanly than any shout ever could. "I can't do this." The words landed softly, and still managed to break everything. A ripple moved through the room, not loud, not chaotic, but stunned. As if everyone had felt the ground shift beneath their feet at the exact same time. The bride stared at him, unblinking. For a second, she looked almost confused, as though she hadn't processed the meaning yet. Then it hit her. "What did you say?" she asked. He turned slightly, not toward her, but toward the woman in black standing just beyond the altar's edge. His shoulders loosened, as if a weight he'd carried for years had finally slipped. "I said I can't do this," he repeated. "I won't pretend anymore." The bride's breath caught. "You're choosing her?" Her voice cracked on the word her. "You're humiliating me in front of everyone." He looked at her then. Not with anger. Not with accusation. With honesty. "I was already humiliated," he said quietly. "I just didn't know it." A gasp slipped from somewhere in the pews. A hand flew to a mouth. Someone stood, then sat back down. The bride laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. "This is insane," she said. "You're throwing everything away for a stranger." "She's not a stranger," he replied. "She's the truth." The woman in black didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't reach for him. She allowed the choice to be his alone. The bride's knees trembled. She grabbed the edge of the altar to steady herself, her bouquet slipping from her fingers and hitting the floor with a dull, forgotten sound. "You promised me," she whispered. "I promised a version of myself that didn't exist," he said. "And I'm sorry." Sorry. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't redemption. But it was real. Her father took a step forward, fury finally breaking through his restraint. "You will regret this," he said. "Both of you." The woman in black met his gaze. "He already has," she said. "That's why he won't anymore." The groom reached up slowly, deliberately, and slid the ring from his finger. The faint metallic sound as it left his hand felt louder than the organ ever had. Every camera rose. Every breath stopped. He placed the ring on the altar, not tossed, not dropped. Set down with care. As if returning something borrowed. The bride let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a scream. Her composure shattered completely now, collapsing inward under the weight of watching her perfect moment disintegrate. "This was supposed to be my day," she said, her voice raw. "Everyone was supposed to see me win." The groom said nothing. He stepped down from the altar. Not toward the bride. Toward the aisle. Toward the woman in black. The distance between them was only a few steps, but it felt like years closing in on themselves. When he stopped beside her, the room seemed to exhale all at once. She turned to him, searching his face, not for certainty, but for understanding. "This path isn't easy," she said quietly. "You know that now." He nodded. "I do. And you still choose it?" "I choose not to lie anymore." She inclined her head, just slightly. Acceptance. Not possession. Behind them, the officiant lowered his book. He didn't need to say anything. The ceremony had already ended. The bride slid down to sit on the steps of the altar, her dress pooling around her like a forgotten stage prop. No one rushed to her. No one knew how. Silence filled the church. Not awkward silence. Not confused silence. The kind that settles when a truth has been spoken and there's nothing left to argue. The groom and the woman in black walked together toward the exit, not rushed, not triumphant. Just forward. As the doors opened, daylight poured in, sharp and real. Behind them lay flowers, vows, expectations, and a future that had never belonged to him. Ahead lay consequences. Unknowns. A promise reclaimed. The doors closed softly. And with them, the wedding dissolved. But the wedding ending was only the beginning. The street outside the church was quieter than it should have been. No cheers. No shouting. Just the low murmur of guests spilling out in fragments, conversations unfinished, eyes still wide with what they'd witnessed. The groom stopped at the top of the steps and drew in a slow breath. For the first time all day, no one was telling him where to stand, what to say, how to smile. The weight on his chest didn't vanish, but it loosened. Behind them, the doors closed. Inside, the bride remained seated on the altar steps long after most of the guests had left. Her dress was still immaculate, her makeup only slightly smudged. But something essential had shifted. The room that had once been built to celebrate her now felt too large, too honest. She replayed the moments in her mind, not the interruption, not the humiliation, but the silences. The pauses where people hadn't moved when she expected them to. The way her father had avoided her eyes. For the first time, she understood. This hadn't been a theft. It had been an exposure. Outside, the woman in black paused at the bottom of the steps. She didn't rush the groom forward. She didn't claim him. She let the moment breathe. "You could still walk away," she said quietly. "No one would chase you." He looked back once, at the doors, at the life he'd almost stepped into out of obligation rather than truth. Then he shook his head. "I already walked away," he said. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That's all I needed to know." As they moved down the street together, the city seemed indifferent to what had just happened. Cars passed. People laughed somewhere nearby. Life continued, unimpressed by ruined ceremonies and broken alliances. That was the point. "You didn't come for revenge," he said after a while. "No," she replied. "Revenge makes noise." "Then why come at all?" She slowed her pace slightly. "Because my father believes promises are only meaningful when they're difficult to keep. He asked me to make sure you were given a choice." He glanced at her, surprised. "A choice?" "Yes," she said. "Not fear. Not force. Choice reveals character." He let that settle. "And now?" he asked. "Now the debt is resolved," she said. "Not because you obeyed, but because you faced it." They reached the corner. Sunlight stretched ahead of them, long and unfiltered. Back at the church, the bride finally stood. She adjusted her dress, lifted her chin, and walked out alone. There would be explanations. There would be fallout. But there would also be clarity, painful, undeniable clarity. She had not lost a man. She had lost control. And for the first time, she knew the difference. Down the street, the groom and the woman in black continued forward, side by side. No cameras. No audience. Just the quiet certainty of a path chosen freely. Behind them, chaos faded. Ahead, nothing was guaranteed. And that, finally, was the truth.